Hello and welcome to GameSec. Let's check out some games that make the console they're on look weak. Now these aren't necessarily bad games, but they definitely make the console seem less capable than it actually is, if you didn't know any better. Racing games usually show off what a console can do, but not this next one. This is hi-octane from Bullfrog for the Saturn. This game is a combat racer, and it uses the engine from Magic Carpet, a game they had made previously. This is a rather early game for the console, and anyone picking this up as their first game was surely very disappointed with the new generation of hardware. This is 32-bit, it looks gross. Basically, you just race around the track, collect weapons, try to destroy other racers, try not to get destroyed, and win the race. You can accelerate by pressing up, because everyone likes that. But seriously, just look at this game. It really doesn't fill you with any kind of confidence that the Saturn is going to have some great 3D graphics in its future. The draw distance can't be more than 20 or 30 feet ahead of you. Look at the track and car selection screens. This is 32x level quality here, maybe even a bit below what we had already seen on everyone's favorite mushroom. There's an egregious amount of texture warping here as well, especially when playing in the first-person perspective. The game slows down a lot, and when this happens, the frame rate drops from the normal rate of about 11 frames per second to 8 frames per second. Everything is just ugly. The cars have no textures, and the tracks feature very little color, and overall, they just have a poor design. Your eyes won't have fun even when this game is paused. Oh, and the sound doesn't help much either. In fact, the music makes me hungry. Is the music making anyone else hungry? Because it keeps beeping like my damn microwave telling me that my food is ready. So okay, the game looks and runs like garbage, but is it any fun to play? No, can't really say that it is. You're probably going to want to play Wipeout instead. hi-octane also came to the PlayStation, by the way. It sucks here too. It's better than the Saturn version graphically in most ways. For example, the race cars now have textures. But this is still a game which makes the console look weak, as the PlayStation is capable of so much better than this. The draw distance is still really bad, as is the way the tiles draw in. I will say though that it's kinda weird to see a PlayStation game with less texture warping than the Saturn. Usually it's the other way around. I wouldn't recommend this game on either console, as both will leave you feeling that the hardware is pathetic. But when it comes down to it, it makes the Saturn feel a bit more pathetic. This is Jim Lee's Wildcats on the Super NES from Playmates. This is a beat-em-up based on the iconic comic book of the same name, which also became an iconic TV show. So iconic, in fact, that I've never heard of it. Oh, and Jim Lee is Stan Lee's son. Well, okay, yeah, maybe I got that one wrong. Anyway, you control some superheroes beating up some bad guys. It's your standard beat-em-up for the most part. You attack and jump. Each character has a slightly more special attack which can be done with the X button. There are also bombs you collect which damage everything on screen that you use with select. Okay, so you're looking at this game and you're wondering, how does this game make the Super NES look weak? I mean, the graphics don't look bad, they seem well drawn, they have plenty of color. Hell, it even moves smoothly. The audio is fine too, so what's going on? Am I on crack? Well, actually it does do something that a lot of games on the Super NES do, but this one seems to be a pretty extreme example of it. And that's that the game barely even fills up half of the screen. There's a black bar on top and a much thicker black bar on the bottom. Like I said, lots of Super Nintendo games do this, just not as much. Most beat-em-ups on the console do this, as well as one-on-one fighting games. It's very common. However, not all games in these genres suffer from this. Games like Wildcats here makes me think that the console just can't do beat-em-ups very well at all. It has to limit the amount of time drawing to the screen or it will slow down immensely. Don't worry though, there's still some slowdown in here sometimes. And no, the severe letterboxing isn't an artistic choice. Nor is it mandated by being a port of a multi-screen arcade game like the Ninja Warriors was on the Mega CD. So anyway, aside from barely using any of the screen, how's the game? Honestly, I think it's worth trying out if you like beat-em-ups. After a couple of stages, you can choose from different characters who have their own missions. The stage design, though, isn't too great in some spots. In fact, I had a hell of a time climbing up this wall. Pissed me off, in fact. Generally, the graphics aren't bad, and even the music is pretty good. But make no mistake, this game can't hang in the same circles as Final Fight and Streets of Rage. It's expected that the first few games that come out for a console are going to be a little weak compared to the norms that are established throughout the console's life, but come on, I think they could have tried a lot harder with this next one. Here's Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle from Sega on the Genesis. This was a launch title for the console. Back then, there weren't a whole lot of choices and we were starved for software. That's why I picked up this game, though not on day one. And honestly, this game does very little to show gamers what the new console is capable of. I mean, just look at it. In fairness, it does look a little better than the Master System games, I guess, but really, not by much at all. There isn't much in the way of detail or the extra colors that the console has. This stage here is about as detailed as the graphics get, and look how they kept most of the things a similar color. I like how here they have a rather ghetto-looking waterfall. But in the next stage, which uses the same graphics, we don't even get that. Just plain blue for the waterfall. It's like they didn't even try. They did end up utilizing the amazing parallax scrolling capabilities of the Genesis that amazed the entire world, but they even screwed that up. Seriously, look, there's barely any separation between the two layers at all. Back then, I had to pretend that the scrolling was at least kinda awesome to justify spending my money on the game, but make no mistake, inside I was disappointed. The sound and the music are okay for their time, but certainly nothing memorable. I was always hoping a game would have voices, as sampled speech blew me away back then. Well, this game has that, but all it says is... Yeah, that's not very exciting. The gameplay does its best to mimic the first Alex Kidd game, but I feel that it mostly misses the mark. It goes all in on the rock, paper, scissors, which was already annoying enough as it was in the first game. So, is this one worth playing? Well, if you played the original game on the Master System and you enjoyed it, then I'd say yeah, this is worth checking out just to see how the series progressed. Be warned though, it's even a bit more slippery to control here. Beyond that, there's not much here for anyone. Sadly, it was one of the very few games that we could play on the console back in the day. Thank goodness that literally everything improved quickly on the Genesis. This is Planet Joker on the Saturn from Nagsat. This game was only released in Japan. It's an isometric shooter similar to Raystorm and Ray Crisis. Right away, you can see how lackluster this game is, and if you play it, you can feel it as well. The shots you fire have very few frames displayed as they travel across the screen, which is a big no-no for shooters. It makes you feel very disconnected from your ship and anything that it's shooting at. You also have a bomb attack, but these will not be replenished between stages. You can collect more, however. Finally, you have a charge type of move where you're invincible and you can destroy enemies by touching them, but your bar needs to be charged before you can use it. It doesn't take very long for it to charge if you just want to blast through the game. The visuals make very poor use of the Saturn's capabilities. Everything is very framey and choppy. It makes extensive use of the Saturn's VDP2 for the ground, which is basically free, meaning that it doesn't eat up any extra CPU. Yet the game is still a slideshow sometimes. The animation is also laughably bad. You come to a point, stop, rotate exactly 90 degrees, then continue on. Doesn't exactly feel natural. I like how when things blow up, even the explosions themselves are somehow flat. If you die, the game takes a very long time to load the continue screen. You only have one life per continue, by the way. Or sometimes the game will grind to a complete stop, load for several seconds, and then an anime person will pop up and talk to you, followed by more loading before the game resumes. Gamers love that! I like this part here where the top of the screen pops in out of nowhere and the cylinders on the sides of the screen are completely unfinished. And yes, you can see both of these flaws on a CRT, they're not cut off with the overscan. As you've no doubt noticed by now, this game is full of dithered mesh graphics. So you're going to want to be careful when playing this one in composite video, which is the devil's favorite video connection. It can result in some rainbow moire. Bleh. Also, except for the full motion video, the entire game is in mono for some reason, with an occasional sound effect popping out of only the left or the right channel in what sounds like a mistake. Yes, I had the game set to stereo. Changing it to mono doesn't make any difference. I assure you, the Saturn is so much better as a console than what you're seeing here. So, how does it play? Honestly, it plays better than it looks, but it's certainly not great. There are definitely games out there that are worse, but I still don't recommend this one. Here's
Awesome Kickstarter machine on spot.
I'm awesome!
from Tengen on the Genesis. You play as a very preachy possum in this exciting side-scrolling platformer. Your goal is to stop pollution. You run, jump, get power-ups, bounce on enemies to kill them, and all that typical stuff. Between rounds, you get to answer questions that make you feel like you're in social studies class at school with some lame do-gooder teacher that nobody likes.
I'm awesome!
In fact, this entire game feels like it was made by some teacher thinking that they could make learning and saving the environment fun by making it a video game. Everyone loves being preached to. That always makes a huge difference in the way people think. Always. In reality though, this game is so bad that it makes me wish I had a fleet of Exxon Valdezes that I could unleash upon the ocean. As you've noticed by now, the scrolling is really choppy. The frame rate is inconsistent. At best, it's running at around 20 frames per second, but when more than a few things are on screen, it slows down to around 8 or 10 frames per second. I don't even know how they managed to do that. Seriously, how do you screw up basic scrolling on a 16-bit console?
I'm awesome!
Not to mention, the artwork is very bad, looking like it was made from a very limited tile set. The game has a ton of voice samples, and like I mentioned, I really like voice samples because they're cool, but they don't help this game at all. Everything he says is annoying.
I'm gonna clean up this world yet.
But I'll give the game some credit because at least you can turn the voices off. If you brought over a friend who loved the NES so that he could see your Genesis and you popped in Awesome Possum Kicks Dr. Machino's butt, he'd think that the Genesis was an incredibly weak console that only incredibly uptight people who thought that they were better and cleaner than everyone else played.
I'm gonna clean up this world yet. Check this out! Cool! I'm awesome! I'm so cool! I'm out of control! Wow! I'm so healthy! Ow! Oh! Why'd I do that? Cut it out! I'm so cool! Alright! I'm awesome!
It's expected that the first few games on console are going to be a little weak compared to the norms that are established throughout the console's life, but come on, wait. I already said all this the last time I was on screen. So what do I say here to justify my appearance? I guess I can't really, so let's just get into the game. Here's Blue Stinger from Activision on the Dreamcast. This game was a launch title here in North America. It plays like a survival horror game, probably because that's what it is. It's kind of like Code Veronica, just well before Code Veronica came along. There are plenty of monsters that want to kill you and not many items and ammo. You can buy more of these by stealing the monster's money when they die. But some monsters are cheap bastards and they don't pay up upon their death. Basically, you're a hotshot on an island that's suddenly been encased in a dome and now monsters are killing everyone. Only you can save the day. You do meet up with other people though. You can even change characters if one has more health or more ammo than the other, but if either of them dies, it's game over. As you can see, the game is extremely ugly. The 3D models of everything, especially the characters, is incredibly rudimentary at best. It often looks laughably bad. Some of the animation is pretty bad as well. The voice acting is also bad.
I knew it. She's perfect. She's my kind of girl.
Oh, and the music is horrible and way too loud with no way to adjust it. If this game was a testament to the Dreamcast's power, well then the Dreamcast would be considered pretty damned weak. The presentation is just super rough. Is it worth playing though? Hell yeah it is, especially if you like survival horror. There are lots of locked doors to find specific keycards for, which is what a survival horror game is all about. Well, most of them anyway. The presentation is honestly kind of endearing after you get over your initial first impressions. It gives the game a certain charm for sure. Well, except for two things that I really need to put my foot down on. I don't like how the screen moves forward in a bumpy way. It almost gives me motion sickness. And the music, especially the volume of the music, can go straight to hell. Otherwise, this is amazingly ambitious for a launch game, gameplay-wise that is. In fact, it's become a cult classic. This is Treasure on the Genesis from Renovation. This is a turn-based JRPG, and a lot of people love these. As far as the story's concerned, you're setting off, leaving your girlfriend Treasure or something, blah blah blah, nobody cares. Then you're suddenly dropped into town, looking for a gang to join in order to wreak havoc on the local wildlife. You seek out the wildlife and destroy animals one by one via random battles. These battles are clumsy at best, as you need to select the action of each individual and then select what you want them to attack. It's all very slow. Back in town, you can buy better gear and even pay to save your game. Now, the visuals generally aren't very good at all, but this one really makes the Genesis look pathetic, mainly because of the scrolling. Once again, someone couldn't figure out how to do scrolling correctly on a 16-bit console. Every second or so, the slowing scrolls to a stop and then starts up again, as if the Genesis is really struggling with it. It's quite annoying because it's almost like you can actually feel it when you're the one controlling the game. You do lots of walking around very big areas in this game, so it's quite prevalent. There's also some really obvious typos. Is the game worth playing otherwise? Well, maybe. As an RPG, it's slow and very primitive, but if you can deal with that, then maybe you might have some fun. And besides, some of the music is actually kinda good. They're re-releasing this one physically for the console for some reason. It gets a new translation, so hopefully the typos will be gone, but the scrolling remains. Help! This is Deadly Premonition for the Xbox 360. It's also on the PlayStation 3, PC, and hell, even the Switch. This is a third-person adventure game where you play as an FBI agent. A girl in town has been murdered and you're there investigating it. Often you'll have to fight shadow people, but it turns out that you're the only one who can see them. Are you hallucinating? What's going on? Better keep all this to yourself for now. Well, you can also tell your imaginary friend that you talk to a lot, that's fine.
Zach, they're here.
The designers and writers here were obviously very inspired by the TV show Twin Peaks, as there are a ton of similarities. Everyone in the small town is very quirky in their own way.
His father started up the lumber trade and founded this town. As I'm sure you can see.
Hell, in case you haven't noticed, even you are pretty quirky.
There's definitely something in this town. Do you feel it, Zach? My coffee warned me about it.
And honestly, that's what gives this game so much damn charm. However, the presentation is pretty rough. Even for its time, the game seems to use very little geometry in its 3D models and environments. The textures are often extremely low quality as well. I mean, just look at the ground here. The textures are often repeated, giving the game a very cheap and ugly tiled feel. The internal resolution can't be much more than 480p. Sometimes the game will do sort of a split screen so that you can see what the killer sees, who's trying to kill you, while you move around and try to find a way to deal with him or escape. While this is super cool, it does have the side effect of making the frame rate slow to a crawl. Otherwise, the game runs at a solid 30 frames per second, which is fairly standard for the time. It's not a pretty game by any means, and really, it feels like this could be done on a PlayStation 2 with graphical headroom to spare. But is it worth playing? Oh, absolutely it is if you like third-person games that lean into the horror genre. Like I said, the characters are great and so is the story, but the gameplay itself is also quite good. You even get to buy crazy expensive food. Yep, over 20 bucks for a single lollipop. That means this game is good. Well, some parts aren't super great, like needing to get gas for your car, constantly needing to take care of yourself with food and sleep just like you're supposed to in real life. It'd be great if that stuff were a bit more automated. I've heard that later editions of this game improve some things, so maybe give one of those a try instead of this original Xbox 360 version here.
This is a good biscuit. I've never tasted a biscuit this delicious. Where in town can I get these?
Well, actually, I baked them myself.
That's amazing. What are you doing in law enforcement? I'm very particular about biscuits, I'll have you know.
Next is a platform where the launch games actually outperformed a lot of the other games that would come out later. As a result, its existence is pretty sad all around. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the 32X. Here's Tough Man Contest for the Sega 32X from Electronic Arts. This is a first-person boxing game where you play as the green outline trying to beat up the other guy. Your goal in this game is to win. You can choose from a lot of different fighters here, but of course I have to go with Coolio. How couldn't you? You fight throughout many different places in the world. Keep in mind that the 32X is a huge 32-bit upgrade to the Genesis with not one but two 32-bit CPUs, 32,768 more colors compared to the Genesis's 512, and amazing Q-Sound 11-bit PWM audio. So yeah, here's the Genesis version of Tough Man Contest by comparison. Can you tell the difference? That's right, the only difference is that the backgrounds have changed. But do the backgrounds in the 32X game look like anything the Genesis couldn't handle? No, they don't. The characters themselves all look and move exactly the same in both versions. Remember, you paid $150 for your 32X. Even if you didn't, you did for the sake of this episode. Those are the rules. But check this out, there's stuff in the Genesis game that's missing from the supposedly superior 32X version. Like this intro with beloved superstar Butterbean. Over on the 32X, you don't get Butterbean, even though he is on the box cover. What, is the 32X too weak to render Butterbean's glorious visage? The 32X does give us a glove smashing the title to pieces that the Genesis version doesn't do. Yay! The 32X only has one ring girl that walks across the screen. The Genesis version has several different girls in addition to the 32X one. Lastly, I'd say that the Genesis version even plays a little better. On the 32X, your arm often gets stuck upward for a second or two after you make an attack, and this doesn't happen to me on the Genesis. So is the game worth playing otherwise? No! The gameplay is mediocre, and it doesn't feel satisfying when an attack connects. The 32X version just makes you feel like you got ripped off for buying the hardware. Or how about Pitfall, the mine adventure from Activision, also on the 32X. In this one, you play as Pitfall's son. Your dad gets kidnapped, so now's your chance to go grab treasures and stuff on your own. This is kind of one of those where the hell do I go games. Each level is quite massive and you go all over the place. It's tough to make out edges and walls that you can or can't go through. Of course, since this is a Western designed game of the time, you can't have a normal life bar. You just can't. The life bar is required to be inventive and cute. In this case, it's an alligator who gets closer to chomping you the lower your health gets. So you may have noticed by now that the game scrolling is a little rough. The foreground scrolls at 30 frames per second at the maximum, often below that. However, the far background scrolls at 60 frames per second. For comparison, here's the Genesis version of Pitfall, the mine adventure. Wow, it sure moves a lot smoother, and honestly that makes it easier to control and play as well. Yeah, it looks a little more dithery and slightly more rough, but who here would rather have more color but choppier motion? I want to see a raise of hands. Yeah, I can't see anyone. All I see is this script in front of my face, so that's what I thought. Nobody raised their hands. Yeah, so even though the Genesis game looks a bit more rugged, I do like that it's brighter and thus easier to see things, and of course I like that it moves so much better as well. So why is the foreground layer choppy on the 32X? That's because it's rendering that layer while the Genesis handles the far backgrounds at twice the speed. It's a bit tougher to get the 32X to scroll at 60 frames per second, but it most certainly can be done as several other games scroll their 32X layers at that speed. The sound and music are the same in both the 32X and the Genesis versions. Games like these will make you feel that the 32X is just a hollow piece of plastic and doesn't really do anything. Actually, a lot of 32X games will make you feel like that. This is Death Crimson on the Saturn from Ecole. It was only released in Japan. This is a light gun game, however I've edited out all of the screen flashing. For every screen flash that I've removed, I've inserted a fart sound effect. So you're shooting down humans who turn into monsters. Actually, I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. If any title should be on a games that make the console look weak list, it certainly is this one. The graphics are absolutely atrocious. They feature a very low polygon count, awful textures, poor artwork, a super low frame rate, and very awkward camera movements. Gotta love how the building and the ground look entirely disconnected. Oh, and don't go thinking that the audio is good either, because it isn't. Not the sound effects, not the music, nothing. Imagine your dad trying to make up for missing your dumb sports game or some idiotic thing like that by buying you a Sega Saturn and Death Crimson. You're super stoked at first, and then you play this. Now, not only do you hate your dad, but you also think that the Saturn isn't even a real console, but one of those impulse item things you can get while waiting in line at the checkout of any given store. This title literally makes the Saturn feel like one of those plug-and-play consoles. In fact, there are more than a few 32X games that feel more powerful. But is it fun to play? No! Your shots fire slowly and inaccurately. It's super easy to get hit and die. There really isn't any fun to be had. Actually, the game is good for something. If you ever wanted a game to assist in producing some vomit, like if you accidentally swallowed something you shouldn't have, this is the one to try. It can save you a trip to the hospital. In fact, maybe it should be included in everyone's emergency medical kit. Here's Shinobi on the PC Engine, brought to you by Asmic. This of course is a conversion of the popular arcade game from 2 years prior. Now this one doesn't really have any poor graphics or performance issues. Yes, it does look worse than the arcade, and yes, there is even some slowdown in 2 or 3 spots. But what really makes the PC Engine look sad is the game itself. So much is missing. Gone are your melee weapons. Hell, you can't even do melee attacks at all. Projectile attacks only. Speaking of that, you don't even get an upgrade to your attack like you do in every other version of the game. A few enemies are missing and replaced with other common enemies. You know what else is missing? The entirety of Mission 2! That's right, you go straight from beating the Mission 1 boss to Mission 3, which is now called Mission 2. So that's 3 stages plus a boss fight that are just gone. Oh, and you know what else is missing? The bonus stages! That's right, these bonus stages, which everyone loves, didn't make the cut. Even the Master System version has this stage, and all of the other stages, and it has less memory. What the hell, Asmic? You expect more from the PC Engine than this. But is playing it worth your time? I mean, not really, since there's many better ways to play this game these days. This one plays faster than the arcade. Your hitbox is bigger, the AI is far more aggressive, and some of the enemy behaviors have changed. But back then, I thought it was fun, for what it is. And there you go, games that make the console look weak. I think I already have one or two lined up for the next episode, at least one for the 3DO. But what are some games that you, yes you, not you or you either, but you think fit the criteria of making the console look weak? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack.
The Sega Genesis Arcade Power Stick! Solid construction! Durable, heavyweight construction that lasts through the most challenging games! Rounded handles! Instant reaction for the true arcade experience! Slider varies rate of Mega Fire! You set how fast the 3 buttons rapid fire when you press them! Mega Fire Light! Flash to show that Mega Fire is working, and they flash at the same speed that you are firing. Buttons! Strategically placed for top scoring performance. Individual Mega Fire! Use these sliders to turn Mega Fire on or off for each of the 3 buttons. Hand grip! Fits your hand for sure control. We bring the arcade experience home. Back up! Rounded handle. Buttons. Buttons.